Swapping Scales for Suave, Chapter 2, Part 2. Spike grinned.
Oh, you were going to love this. So, I finally managed to get Ember to allow some of the friendlier dragons to set up a permanent town at the edge of their territory, and I'm gonna be there for the grand opening festival.
Fascinating.
Rarity exclaimed.
But I'm confused as to why the Dragon Lord would be against this at all.
Spike winced.
The area is populated mainly by earth ponies, who used to be raided by some of the meaner dragons way back when, so there's some bad blood there. No deaths or anything like that, mind you, it's just a bit of a sore spot, and some dragons are against the very concept of trade or even a permanent settlement.
Well, it is a bit of a leap for them.
Rarity added, and Spike nodded.
There have been plenty of dragons that immigrated to Equestria in addition to some of them having enclaves in several major cities, but dragons having their own town? That apparently hasn't happened in centuries.
I hope I'm not interrupting anything too important,
exclaimed Sunny Smiles, who stepped up to their table with a large platter held atop her hoof.
I also hope that I didn't just overhear some sort of state secret and now you need to wipe my brain or something.
Oh, don't think of it as a brain wipe. Think of it as a simple cranial cleaning.
Spike replied with a smirk. Rarity giggled.
Well, that was delightfully dark, darling. Quite.
Added Sunny.
Though I don't suppose I could just bribe you with food by chance?
That just may work.
In that case, here you are.
Sunny Smiles declared before expertly placing their order before them.
This looks wonderful.
Rarity exclaimed.
And quick too,
Spike pointed out. A second later and the table was full, and the older unicorn mare had the platter under her hoof.
Now then, is there anything else that you need?
She asked.
I don't think so. How about you, Spiky Wikey?
Rarity inquired. The dragon blushed and shook his head.
We're fine here, Sunny. Thank you.
It was my pleasure,
Sunny declared before shooting Spike a knowing wink and slipping back into the kitchen. Spike briefly wondered what that had all been about. A hand unconsciously reached for his breast pocket. However, the dragon stopped himself at the last moment and forced his arms to fall slack at his sides. There was no way that she knew, and even if she did, the pony seemed to be wishing him luck in her own way.
Kinda like the driver did,
Spike thought.
Is it really that obvious?
Is there something wrong, darling?
Rarity inquired. Spike shook his head.
Oh, it's nothing. I was just thinking about how they should really get them some proper hats.
Oh, those paper ones are quite dreadful, aren't they?
Rarity muttered before dipping a fry into some ketchup and biting down on it. Spike nodded and grabbed his burger.
So I told you about what I have coming up, but what is this secret project that you've barely mentioned?
Oh, it's the only opportunity of a lifetime!
Rarity gushed enthusiastically, as if she had barely been able to restrain herself until that very moment.
The Canterlot Symphony Orchestra is replacing their old dusty outfits, and have asked moi to replace them.
Spike chewed and swallowed his mouthful of food before responding.
That is quite the project. Though, how many chances of a lifetime have you had already? 6, 7?
Oh, har har.
Rarity mocked, pointing a fry at the dragon.
I'll have you know that every chance to prove my designs on a larger scale is a chance of a lifetime.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Spike began.
I felt the same way about our date 2 years ago.
Rarity blushed and swallowed her food.
I must admit, I wasn't sure if it was going to work out. You were so young, and there always seemed to be some calamity coming every few months, like clockwork.
I'm not that much younger than you.
Spike remarked with a pout.
I know, darling, I know. I just can't help but imagine that Twilight is the same age as me, despite her actually being a few years older.
Rarity explained.
When she first arrived, she was just so...
naive, impressionable, antisocial.
Spike offered.
I can keep going, you know.
Rarity rolled her eyes.
You needn't bother, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do.
Spike said, cleaning his claws on a napkin.
I'm just glad that we worked past that, though.
Indeed.
Rarity muttered wistfully.
To think, we've been living together for 6 months and haven't even fought yet.
Oh, wait, what about...
Spike began, only to be cut off by a glare.
That whole business with the milk doesn't count.
Rarity declared. Spike chuckled and raised his arms defensively.
Alright, fair enough.
Rarity huffed indignantly before taking a sip of her drink.
It really is something, though.
What is?
Spike pressed.
Us.
Rarity said.
During those first few months, I couldn't imagine it lasting longer than a year. No offense, darling, but my head just wasn't there. I know I always talked about my Prince Charming, but I didn't even know if that's what I truly wanted.
I know.
Spike declared firmly. Rarity sighed.
Yet now, I couldn't imagine this ever ending.
Spike's eyes went wide, and his hand went to his jacket.
Speaking of which...
Rarity blinked.
What are...
The unicorn's jaw hung open in shock as she watched her boyfriend leave the booth and get down on one knee.
I feel the exact same way about you, Rarity.
Spike began, his voice quivering briefly.
Ever since we returned here for our 1-year anniversary, I knew I wanted to marry you. And now that I found the perfect ring, I knew it was time.
Spike,
Rarity gasped and fanned herself with a hoof, tears forming at the edge of her eyes.
Rarity, will you marry me?
Rarity's already wide eyes grew wider still, her attention immediately going to the pair of sparkling rings now sitting before her. There was a single moment where Spike thought that he saw hesitation in those large blue orbs. Yet, it was gone in an instant, replaced by excitement, the likes of which would put Pinkie Pie to shame.
of course I'll marry you!
She shouted shortly, before throwing herself at the dragon, who only just barely managed to catch her without falling over in the process. Their lips met a moment later, with both passionately leaning into one another. For a precious few seconds, there was nothing but the joy that they collectively shared, and the heat of each other's presence. Then they parted and quickly realized that the whole staff was standing right there, as well as a curious few students who had wandered over from their table. This action seemed to have broken some unspoken rule, for as one of the other ponies let out a cheer.
Congratulations! I knew that they would do it.
It's so romantic! Rarity smiled, and gently took a step away from her lover.
I can't believe that you finally did it.
Finally?
Spike questioned. Rarity scoffed.
I was ready to marry you a year ago.
The dragon chuckled.
Well, better late than never, right?
For you, darling, I'd wait 1,000 years.
Rarity exclaimed, the unicorn planting one final kiss on Spike's lips. The crowd cooed in unison, making Spike remember that they weren't exactly alone. He was about to ask for some privacy, only to realize that streamers now hung from the ceiling, as well as a banner that said congratulations on it.
What the...
Spike muttered.
I had a sneaking feeling that you were gonna propose, so I grabbed the birthday stuff while you were eating.
Sunny Smiles explained.
It's wonderful, thank you.
Rarity added. Sunny Smiles blushed and rubbed the back of her neck.
It was nothing.
Come on, put the ring on her, Spike! Shouted Burnmark. A couple of other ponies yelled their agreement with this course of action.
Alright. Sheesh, you think I was marrying you guys and not Rarity.
Spike muttered, as he retrieved the ring from its case before looking expectantly down at Rarity.
May I?
You may.
Rarity replied, bowing her head slightly. Spike gently placed the ring at the base of his partner's horn, and watched it as it shrunk ever so slightly to fit.
How's it feel?
He inquired.
Rather snug, but I think it should be fine.
Rarity replied, testing her magic by lifting her drink and taking a sip.
Perfect.
Spike declared before reaching for the box. Rarity interrupted, grabbing his hand.
Allow me, darling.
Spike blushed and extended his hand.
Of course.
Rarity wasted no time in levitating the ring onto his finger, which she then twisted so the stones were pointing upwards. It then grew ever so slightly, before Rarity then set it at the base of Spike's ring finger. Their eyes met, and for a moment they both felt an intense surge of happiness course through them. A milestone had been crossed, a goal was achieved, and in their heart of hearts they knew that they both felt the same. However, a second, far stranger surge followed the first, knocking them both back, and left both the dragon and the unicorn dizzy. They then collapsed as all feeling fled their bodies, only for the vertigo to return with a vengeance. They were both dimly aware of the ponies asking if they were okay, as well as a nervous fry cook sprinting to the back in search for a pair of ice packs. Spike and Rarity's own confusion increased when one of them realized that they were taller than they had been a second ago, while the other was far shorter and was now kneeling for some reason. As the stars began to clear from his vision, Spike realized that he was no longer looking down on Rarity, but rather up at himself. Rarity, meanwhile, was just as confused as her partner, mostly due to the fact that she was now standing on 2 legs. Both had gained and lost appendages, as well as senses, while also being completely baffled in the process.
What happened?
Muttered the dragon, who immediately gasped in surprise and wrapped their hands around their mouth.
Why are you in my body?
Asked the unicorn.
Wait, me? Why are you in my body?
Shrieked Rarity.
Wait, what's going on here? Are they doing a bit?
Asked one of the students.
A bit? Do you think I would try to ruin one of the most happiest days of my life like this?
Yelled Rarity, who raised her forearms into the air.
Hey now, I'm sure that this is all just a big...
Spike muttered, the unicorn landing directly onto his face after trying to take a step.
Why are your legs so small?
Small? I'll have you know that I have a perfectly proportioned body.
Rarity yelled, jabbing a finger at her partner only to fall forward when she didn't correctly balance her weight.
Just walk on your hands and feet.
Spike offered.
It's actually a fairly natural position.
Rarity grumbled as she pushed herself up onto her new appendages.
Thank you, darling. Now, could you please explain what in the hay just happened?
Spike coughed awkwardly.
The rings, they were supposed to let us feel how the others felt, but I think something went wrong. An emotional feedback spell shouldn't have done something like that,
Remarked the young unicorn mare with a frizzy pink mane.
Just give me a second to scan it and...
Rarity sighed and ran a hand down her face.
Right, I don't have a horn anymore.
May I?
Offered Unicorn Stallion with a slim build and bright green eyes. Rarity nodded.
Yes, and please hurry, darling. I don't know how much of this I can take.
The student closed his eyes and lit his horn. A second later, and a soft purple light ran down the body-switched beings' bodies.
Well, that solves that.
He remarked.
You're cursed.
Cursed? How could I be cursed on the day of my engagement? This is terrible. This is horrible. This is the worst possible thing!
Shrieked Rarity, before she toppled to the floor like a puppet with her strings cut. Spike sighed as he gazed down onto the fainted Rarity.
Can some pony help me hail a cab and get both Rarity and I into it? I have a jeweler to chew out.
He asked.
Small fry, grab some ice water for our guest.
Sunny Smiles barked.
Burnmark, package up their food. Something tells me that our guest is going to be mighty hungry when they wake up.
Right!
Right.
Yelled the staff before sprinting back into the kitchen. Spike smiled.
Thank you, Sunny. Not a problem.
Replied the mayor.
Though I am curious as to what you plan to do. Oh, it's not a matter of what I'm going to do. It's a matter of what I'm going to undo.
Spike replied grimly.
Dude, he's gonna beat the crap out of that stallion.
I'm actually wondering if that's what he's going to do. Probably not. But he might just go back and yell at him a lot. That's probably what's gonna happen. I'm gonna bet 500 scrap on Rust in that. Now let's get on to our blessed donators. Top donators: TacoCat598, Peter Coulthard, J Tin Man, Darkside, Ponyman, and Gauntlet. CourierCruz CI, Strix, Zar630, Narwhals, Rayden, Blackmoonheart, Drake Lovedragon, Dospo, Delta Omega, RuneScyther9852, Hunter Norman, Austin Rowland, Dash of Evergreen, Ryan A. Dragonwolf, Secret Moon, Tal Rasha, The Toilet Snake, Sword Brother and Mordred, Ron and Wandering, Enderai63, Random Person Man Guy, Easy, Jack Cadge, Sky Uchiha, Leslie Prickett, Jordan Peterson, Crimson Kitten A9, Lightskin, Monster Kitty, Starlight Glimmer, Lightning Blitz, Squiddy Boy, David E. Sanchez, Soul Dragon, Gaggy, Trey, Shadow Drake, Joe Piercy, Alex F., Rainbow Dash, Teal'c Anderson, TV Killer, John Becker, Leon Reynolds, Raven Speedster, Zach Rakau, Mystery CU, Edgar Garcia, One Kingdom 1, Nissa Rusan, Vazuri, Dyslexic Character Sheets, Just a Random Boy, Hodrick Plancard, A Crazy Person, Ponyman365, Daniel Beck, 6 of 9, and Shyfire. Thank you all very much for watching this video, and live life to the fullest.